The city was quiet, but the world was not. In the midst of clashing industries and collapsing traditions, a man named Maxwell Chikumbutso sat in a modest workshop filled with wires, blueprints, and machines that seemed more like dreams than reality. The smell of solder hung in the air, the hum of an unfinished invention buzzing softly like a distant promise. For years, Maxwell had been called a visionary by some and a fraud by others, but deep down, he didn't care what they said. He had something they didn't, a future that existed in his mind, a transportation system so advanced that the very idea of fuel and charging stations would soon sound as outdated as horse-drawn carriages. As he leaned over a small prototype vehicle, the reflection of hope danced in his eyes. Across the table lay a notebook filled with sketches of cars without engines as we know them, vehicles that would glide silently across cities and deserts alike, never stopping for gas, never plugging into a grid. One day, he whispered to himself, "They'll understand." In London, thousands of miles away, investors gathered in a sleek glass tower overlooking the Thames. The conversation was electric. They had heard the rumors, seen the whispers on tech blogs about a man from Africa creating machines that defied the laws of energy. Among them was Richard Collins, a venture capitalist with a sharp suit and sharper instincts. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the holographic projection of a car design unlike anything he'd seen before. "If this works," Richard said slowly, "it changes everything. Oil, electric grids, battery giants, they all go extinct." His words hung in the room like a prophecy. Across the table, a young analyst named Emily adjusted her glasses and spoke with caution. "But it doesn't make sense," she said. "Every law of physics says perpetual motion is impossible. Energy has to come from somewhere." Richard smiled faintly. "Maybe the laws aren't wrong," he said. "Maybe our understanding is incomplete." Meanwhile, in a bustling city square in Nairobi, rumors spread like wildfire. People gathered around giant digital billboards showing sleek silver vehicles racing silently through deserts and forests without a single charging station in sight. The words "power beyond power" flashed boldly, and beneath it, a name, Maxwell Chikumbutso. Some cheered, some laughed in disbelief, but everyone was talking. Social media exploded with hashtags, #FutureCars, #MaxwellVision, #NoFuelRevolution. Videos claiming to show Maxwell's prototypes running without fuel went viral overnight. Governments started asking questions. Oil companies started sweating. And somewhere deep in a boardroom in Texas, the CEO of a major oil corporation slammed his fist on the table. "Find out what's real and what's fake," he growled. "And if it's real, make sure it never sees daylight." Back in his workshop, Maxwell was oblivious to the storm his vision was stirring. He wasn't thinking about markets or politics, he was thinking about children. He remembered walking to school barefoot as a boy, miles every day under the blistering African sun. He remembered watching families spend what little they had on fuel, leaving nothing for food or education. That memory burned like a coal in his heart. Transportation should not be a burden, he told his assistant, a bright young engineer named Daniel, who had been by his side since the early days. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and asked, "Max, do you really think the world is ready for this?" Maxwell smiled, a tired but confident smile. "They weren't ready for light bulbs either," he said. "Or airplanes. Or the internet. The world is never ready, until it has no choice. But change is never easy, and it never comes without a fight." Within weeks, Maxwell's workshop was buzzing with more than just machines. Journalists showed up at his gates, drones hovered over his rooftops, and letters from lawyers began piling up on his desk. Some offered partnerships, others issued threats. And then came the first offer, a $1 billion check from a multinational corporation in exchange for shutting everything down. Daniel stared at the paper in disbelief. "Max, this could set you up for life," he said, his voice trembling. Maxwell looked at the check for a long moment, then tore it in half without saying a word. "If I sell this," he said finally, "then I'm no better than the ones who built the problem." Across the ocean, in a university lab in California, a group of physics professors gathered to dissect the claims. They argued over energy equations, mocked videos online, and wrote papers debunking the concept. "This is nothing but a scam," one of them declared. "Energy cannot be created from nothing." Yet, as they spoke, a quiet unease settled in the room. If it was a scam, why were global companies suddenly silent? Why were governments holding emergency meetings behind closed doors? And why did an unassuming African inventor suddenly become the most searched name on the planet? Meanwhile, Maxwell moved quietly, finishing what he started. The car was almost ready, not a prototype, but a real production model. It had no exhaust pipe, no charging port, no fuel tank. Instead, it carried within it a system so advanced, so unconventional, that even the engineers working on it didn't fully understand every part. Maxwell called it green energy dynamics, but to the world, it looked like magic. The launch day was announced, a small event in his home country, live-streamed to the world. The night before the event, Maxwell sat alone in the workshop, staring at the finished car. He ran his hand along its smooth metallic surface and whispered, "Tomorrow, they will see." When the sun rose, the world was watching. Reporters filled the small venue, cameras flashed, and live streams broke internet records. Maxwell stepped onto the stage in a simple suit, no flashy presentation, no billionaire showmanship, just a man in his dream. For too long, he began, transportation has been chained by cost, pollution, and dependency. Today, we cut those chains. The curtains fell, revealing the car, a sleek, futuristic design that seemed alive under the lights. Gasps filled the room. And then came the test drive. Maxwell slid behind the wheel, pressed a button, and the car came to life, silent, smooth, and powerful. He drove it across the stage, out the doors, onto the open road, cameras following from above. Mile after mile, it kept going, no stops, no charges. The internet erupted. Headlines screamed, "The car that never stops, Maxwell breaks the rules of physics, is this the end of oil?" But for Maxwell, it wasn't about headlines. As the car glided through the countryside, past children waving from dusty roads, he felt something bigger than technology, freedom. A future where no one is left behind because they can't afford fuel, where cities breathe clean air, where journeys are endless. That was his vision, and now, it was no longer a dream, it was real. Yet, deep in the corridors of power, a new game had begun. Corporations plotted, governments scrambled, and whispers of sabotage grew louder. The revolution had started, but the war for the future of transportation was only beginning. And Maxwell Chikumbutso? He drove on, knowing the road ahead would not be easy, but knowing, too, that nothing could stop an idea whose time had come.